My brother-in-law secretly filmed me in the shower. Now my family calls me a liar desperate for attention. I don't even know where to start. Just thinking about it makes my hands shake. I never thought something like this could happen to me, and definitely not in my own family. But here I am, completely alone, everyone looking at me like I'm crazy or dangerous or, worse, like I made it all up. It all started 2 months ago, when my sister Claire and her husband Matt came to stay at our house. My husband Lucas and I have a decent-sized place with a guest room, and Claire asked if they could crash with us for a couple of weeks while their apartment was being renovated. At first, I didn't think twice. Claire is my big sister. We've always been close, or at least, I thought we were. I thought Matt was okay too. Not someone I'd call a friend, but polite. Normal. I trusted them. The first few days were fine. We cooked together, laughed, shared wine in the evenings. Lucas seemed happy to have company. It felt safe. Warm. Familiar. But then small things started to happen that didn't sit right with me. I kept brushing them off, because who wants to believe something dark is happening right under their nose? The first thing was the bathroom door. I'm someone who locks the door every time I shower, always have, always will. But twice, I found the door slightly open when I was done, even though I was sure I had locked it. The first time, I blamed myself, maybe I hadn't turned the lock fully. The second time, I felt this weird chill in my spine, like something was off, but Lucas laughed it off and said I was just stressed from work. I told myself he was probably right. Then there was the phone. Matt was always on his phone, like most people are, but I noticed he had this habit of putting it face down whenever I walked into the room. Once, I swear he flinched when I almost caught a glimpse of what was on the screen. I remember feeling unsettled, but again, I told myself I was being paranoid. And then it happened. That morning, Lucas had already left for work. Claire was out shopping. I decided to take a long shower, just to clear my head. I locked the door, I checked it twice, literally, put on my music, and stepped in. At some point, I heard a noise. Like a soft click. I turned around quickly, heart racing, but saw nothing. I finished my shower, dried off, and as I was reaching for my robe, I noticed something sticking out slightly from under the sink cabinet. A glint of black plastic. It was a phone. Someone had wedged a phone between the cabinet and the wall, with the camera lens pointed directly at the shower. I froze. My stomach dropped, my brain literally refused to process what I was seeing. I grabbed the phone with shaking hands. The screen was locked. I didn't know what to do. I felt dizzy. Violated. Terrified. I wrapped myself in the robe, clutching the phone like it was burning my skin, and ran downstairs. The only people in the house were me and Matt. I found him in the kitchen, calmly making coffee, like nothing had happened. I couldn't breathe. I demanded to know if it was his phone. He looked confused for half a second too long, before saying it wasn't his. But it was. I recognized the case, a black matte cover with a tiny chip on the side. I'd seen him use it hundreds of times. He kept denying it, getting defensive, acting like I was crazy, and when Claire came home, she immediately took his side without even hearing me out properly. She said I must be stressed. I must have imagined it. Maybe it was my own phone, they said. Or maybe Lucas's. They made me feel like I was insane. Like I was looking for drama. Lucas came home, and I thought he'd have my back. I begged him to help me unlock the phone to prove it, but when Matt suddenly found his phone in his pocket, like magic, the phone I'd discovered was gone. Disappeared. They said I must have made a mistake. Maybe it was an old phone. Maybe it was something left from before. And Lucas, he hesitated. He actually hesitated. He looked at me like he wasn't sure what to believe. My own husband. That night, I cried until I couldn't breathe. Claire came into the room at one point, sat on the edge of the bed, and told me she was worried about me. About my mental health. She said maybe I needed help, That she'd always be there for me, no matter what, but that I had to stop making accusations that could destroy lives. I felt like I was losing my mind. And that was just the beginning. I can't even put into words what came next. I barely slept that night. My mind kept replaying the image of that phone half hidden under the sink, the camera pointing straight at me without my knowledge. The more I thought about it, the more certain I became, it wasn't a mistake. It wasn't stress. I hadn't imagined anything. I knew what I saw. And Matt's face, that tiny flicker of panic before he covered it up, I couldn't get it out of my head. The worst part? Lucas. My own husband. He didn't believe me. Or maybe he didn't want to believe me. Either way, the look he gave me, half doubt, half pity, cut deeper than anything Matt or Claire could have done. The next morning, everything felt wrong. Tense. Matt acted like nothing happened, smiling, pouring himself coffee, cracking jokes. Claire was cold. Distant. And Lucas? He barely looked me in the eye. It was like I had suddenly become this fragile, unstable person in their eyes. Like the problem was me. I wanted to scream. I wanted to take that phone and shove it in their faces. But the phone was gone. Like it had never existed. And without it, I had nothing. No proof, just my word against theirs. Still, I couldn't let it go. I started watching Matt more carefully. The way he looked at me when he thought no one was watching. The subtle glances. The quick exits whenever I entered a room. And something else, a smugness. A confidence that made my skin crawl. Like he knew he had the upper hand. That weekend, Claire suggested we all go out for dinner to lighten the mood. I wanted to say no. I wanted to scream in her face. But I played along because I needed time to think. I needed a plan. At the restaurant, Matt sat across from me. I could feel his eyes on me the whole time, even when I wasn't looking. Every time I shifted in my seat, I could see the hint of a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. Claire kept talking, oblivious. Lucas tried to act normal, but I could see the tension in his jaw. I barely touched my food. I couldn't. My heart was pounding too hard. My stomach was in knots. When we got home, I made an excuse to forget something in the car. Lucas and Claire went inside. But Matt, he lingered. He stood by the door, watching me with this look. I still don't know how to describe it. Cold. Predatory. He smiled slightly and said, "You really should try to relax, you know. You're making things weird for everyone." I froze. My throat went dry. I wanted to say something, anything, but nothing came out. He just walked inside like he hadn't just poured gasoline on the fire inside me. That night, I cried in the bathroom, sitting on the cold tiles, staring at myself in the mirror. Who was I becoming? This wasn't me. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining this. But no one believed me. And the more I pushed, the more I looked like the villain. I made a decision right there, on that bathroom floor. I was going to find proof. Real proof. I was going to catch him. No one was going to gaslight me out of my own reality. Not my sister. Not my husband. And definitely not Matt. What I didn't realize then was just how far he'd go to make sure I stayed silent. And how far I would have to go to finally be heard. I started by doing what I should have done from the very beginning. I trusted my gut. No more giving people the benefit of the doubt. No more second-guessing myself. I needed to be smart. Careful. Quiet. The next day, I told Lucas I was going to spend the afternoon shopping, alone. I kissed him goodbye, smiled like everything was fine. But instead of going to the mall, I drove straight to an electronics store and bought 2 hidden cameras. Tiny ones. Discreet. The kind that could record hours of footage without being noticed. My hands were trembling when I paid for them. My heart was pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. But I didn't back down. I couldn't. When I got home, everyone was gone. Claire and Matt were out running errands, Lucas was still at work. I moved quickly. I installed one camera in the bathroom, hidden inside a decorative box on a shelf facing the shower. The other, I tucked into a plant in the hallway near the guest room, angled just right to catch anyone moving between the rooms. I felt sick doing it. Like I was violating my own home. But I reminded myself over and over, I wasn't the one who crossed the line, I was just protecting myself. That night, everything seemed normal. Too normal. Claire and Matt laughed over dinner, Lucas looked relaxed. For a moment, I almost let myself believe maybe I had overreacted. Maybe I was spiraling. But then, late that night, I checked the footage on my phone. And my blood ran cold. At 10:42 p.m. when everyone was supposed to be asleep, Matt left the guest room. He crept down the hallway. He paused, just outside the bathroom. For almost 5 full minutes, he stood there. I could see the faint light of his phone screen. I watched in horror as he knelt down, glanced over his shoulder, and slid something under the bathroom door. I felt my stomach twist into knots. He was still doing it. Still recording. Still invading me. I couldn't breathe. I sat there in the dark, shaking, replaying the footage over and over. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't me being sensitive or paranoid like Claire kept saying. This was real. The next morning, I was a ghost. I barely spoke. I barely ate. My mind was spinning with what to do next. Confront him? Tell Lucas? Call the police? Every option felt terrifying in its own way. But then something happened that made everything worse. Claire pulled me aside while the guys were out getting groceries. She told me, with this soft, fake concerned tone, that she and Matt had been talking, and they were both worried about me. That maybe I was going through something and needed help. She said I'd been acting erratic, that I seemed confused lately. I felt my throat close up. They were setting me up. Turning me into the crazy one. I could see it so clearly now. If I accused him again, they'd spin it as a mental breakdown, an overactive imagination. They'd turn Lucas against me completely. It hit me like a punch to the chest, this wasn't just Matt. Claire was in on it. Maybe not on the filming, but definitely on the gaslighting. The cover-up. The manipulation. The betrayal sliced through me sharper than any blade. My own sister. I went to bed that night with a fire burning inside me. I wasn't going to let them win. I wasn't going to be the woman everyone dismissed as hysterical or unstable. I had proof. And I was going to use it. What I didn't know was that things were about to spiral out of control in a way I could never have predicted. And that the people I thought I could trust the most were about to destroy me completely. I barely slept that night. The weight of what I knew, the disgust of being gaslit by my own sister, the sheer horror of having been filmed in the most vulnerable state imaginable, it was crushing me. But under the fear, something else was growing. A cold, sharp anger. I couldn't let this continue. I couldn't let them win. The next morning, I woke up before everyone. I replayed the footage again, my heart racing. I needed to be absolutely sure of what I had. It was all there, Matt sneaking out, sliding his phone toward the bathroom. Clear. Undeniable. Lucas was already up, sipping coffee. I decided to test the waters. I sat across from him and asked, as casually as I could, "Do you think I'm losing it? I mean, really?" He frowned. "Of course not. Why are you saying that?" I hesitated. Claire said I've been acting strange. That maybe I need help. It just made me wonder. For a moment, his expression softened. He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You've been through a lot lately. I get that. But you're not crazy. Don't let anyone make you feel that way." I almost cried. But then, just as quickly, he let go and went back to his phone. Detached. Distant. The warmth lasted seconds. And I knew right then, I couldn't count on him. Not fully. I needed real backup. Real witnesses. Real power. That afternoon, while Claire and Matt were out, I called my childhood best friend, Sophie. She lived in the next town over. We hadn't talked in a while, but she was the only person I trusted who wasn't tangled up in this mess. I told her everything. Every sickening detail. The phone in the bathroom. The manipulation. The hidden camera footage. Her voice trembled when she answered, "You need to get out of that house. Right now." But I couldn't. Not yet. Not until I had ironclad proof that no one could deny. Not until Matt and Claire couldn't twist the story into another lie. Sophie offered to come over, and I agreed. I needed someone, anyone, on my side physically, not just over the phone. When Sophie arrived that evening, she hugged me so tight I nearly broke. For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of hope. I showed her the footage. I watched her face change, the shock, the horror, the fury. "This is criminal," she whispered. "You need to call the police." "I will," I said. "I just need to catch him in the act. One more time, so they can't say I planted anything or made it up." She agreed to stay the night. To help. To be my witness. That evening, I acted like everything was fine. I smiled. I laughed at dinner. I made small talk while my stomach churned. Sophie played along perfectly, pretending she was just visiting to catch up. But underneath, we were both waiting. Watching. At 11:17 p.m. it happened. Sophie and I, sitting quietly in my room, heard the faintest creak on the floorboards. I checked the hallway cam on my phone in real time. Matt. I watched in cold, shaking silence as he crept down the hall again. This time he had something small in his hand. He paused by the bathroom, glancing nervously over his shoulder. Sophie gasped softly. "Oh my God." He crouched. Slid something under the door. Then stood. Smiled to himself. And walked back to the guest room. We had him. It was over. Or so I thought. What I didn't know yet was that Matt wasn't the only one watching me. And that the real nightmare was just beginning. The next morning, Sophie and I barely spoke. We didn't need to. The weight of what we had witnessed, the undeniable proof sitting in my phone, was too overwhelming. I felt sick, but for the first time in weeks, I also felt steady. Clear. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. And now, I could prove it. We agreed to go straight to the police that afternoon. But first, I wanted to confront Matt in front of Claire and Lucas. I wanted to see their faces. I wanted to look my sister in the eye while I shattered the little web of lies they had built around me. I waited until after lunch. Everyone was home. Matt was lounging on the couch like nothing had happened, scrolling through his phone. Claire was in the kitchen, chatting to Lucas like we were just one big happy family. I stood in the living room and said, loud and clear, "Matt, we need to talk." He looked up lazily. "What's up?" My hands were shaking, but I didn't back down. Sophie stood silently behind me, her presence giving me the strength I needed. "I know what you've been doing," I said. "And I have proof." For half a second, his eyes flickered. That same tiny flash of panic I'd seen before, but then he smiled, so casual, so smug it made me want to scream. "Proof of what?" he asked, his tone light, almost amused. Claire came closer, frowning. "What's going on?" I pulled out my phone, my heart pounding so loud I could barely hear my own voice. "I installed cameras. Last night. I have you on video, Matt. Sliding your phone under the bathroom door. Twice." The room went dead silent. Matt's face paled, just for an instant, before he laughed. Actually laughed. "Are you serious right now? Hidden cameras? Wow. And I thought I was the one being accused of being creepy." He looked around like he was the victim, shaking his head in disbelief. Claire's face twisted into something between confusion and disgust. You filmed Matt? Without telling anyone? Are you out of your mind? I blinked. What? No, I filmed the hallway. For my safety. Because She cut me off. Do you even hear yourself? You're spying on your own family? You're setting him up? Oh my God. My breath caught. I'm the one being filmed in the shower, Claire. He's the one violating me. Matt held up his hands, grinning. Look, I don't know what she thinks she saw, but I have nothing to hide. I turned to Lucas, desperate. Please. Just look. I have it right here. But Lucas didn't move. He looked frozen. Conflicted. His eyes darted between me and Claire. Between me and Matt. His mouth opened, then closed again. And then Claire said it, I think she needs help. Those 4 words. Cold. Sharp. Final. Something shattered inside me. Sophie stepped forward, furious. She's not crazy. I saw it too. We both watched the video. But they weren't listening. Claire was shaking her head, tears in her eyes. Matt kept playing the victim. Lucas just stood there, paralyzed. It hit me with brutal clarity, they weren't ever going to believe me. Not because they didn't see the truth, because they didn't want to. Because admitting it would tear the family apart. Because admitting it would mean facing something far too ugly for them to handle. I felt like I was falling. Spinning. That afternoon, Sophie and I went straight to the police. We showed them everything. The videos. The timeline. The history. They took it seriously, thank God. They opened a formal investigation and promised to retrieve the device Matt had used. But when the police arrived at my house the next day, the phone was gone. Matt denied everything. Calm. Smiling. Claire cried and said I was unstable. Lucas, my own husband, stood there and said he didn't know what to think. And just like that, the story shifted. I became the crazy wife. The paranoid sister. The woman who fabricated a nightmare for attention. The police said they'd keep investigating, but without the device, without more evidence, there wasn't much they could do immediately. The damage was done. My family, the people I thought would protect me, turned their backs. I wasn't just betrayed. I was completely and utterly alone. And the worst part? I could still see the glint of triumph in Matt's eyes every time he looked at me. The days that followed were the darkest of my life. I didn't even recognize myself anymore. My own house felt like a prison. Every time I crossed paths with Matt, I could feel his eyes on me, cold and amused, like he'd already won some twisted game. Claire refused to speak to me. Lucas barely came home. The silence was worse than any words they could have thrown at me. The way they looked at me, as if I was dangerous, unstable, unhinged, cut deeper than I thought possible. And the police. They were moving too slowly. Without the device, without the actual files, the case felt like it was slipping through my fingers. Sophie stayed with me as much as she could. She was my only lifeline, the only person reminding me that I wasn't insane, that what I had seen was real. But even she couldn't protect me from the psychological warfare happening under my own roof. One night, something inside me broke. I overheard Claire on the phone with our mother, telling her how worried she was about me. How I was losing touch with reality. How I might need professional help before something bad happens. She was crying, putting on this performance so convincingly that for a split second, even I started to doubt myself. That's how deep their manipulation ran. I stood outside the door, shaking, biting my lips so hard I tasted blood. And I realized they were never going to stop. Not until they destroyed me completely. I knew what I had to do. The next morning, while everyone was still asleep, I packed a single bag. Essentials only. I wasn't safe there. Not physically, not mentally. The longer I stayed, the more power they had over me. Sophie had already offered me a place to stay, and I finally said yes. I left a note for Lucas. Short. Cold. I told him I couldn't stay married to someone who didn't believe me. That trust wasn't optional in a relationship. That by standing by in silence, he had chosen his side, and it wasn't mine. I didn't say goodbye to Claire. Or to Matt. I just walked away. Sophie drove me to her place, and the moment I stepped inside, I broke down completely. The dam I'd been holding for weeks shattered. I cried until I physically couldn't anymore. But even then, even in the safety of her home, the nightmare didn't end. Matt started texting me. At first, it was subtle: "Sorry for the misunderstanding, we can fix this." Then the messages turned darker. More threatening. "You're ruining everything for nothing. No one's going to believe you." I showed the police the texts. They added them to the report but said it still wasn't enough for an arrest. Not yet. And then, as if things couldn't get any worse, the final blow came. My mother called me. I thought maybe, just maybe, she was reaching out to support me. To say she believed me. But instead, her voice was tight, cold. "I don't know what's going on with you," she said, "but your sister is devastated. You need help. Real help. Before you lose everyone." I stood there, phone shaking in my hand, listening to the only family I had left side with him. With them. It felt like dying in slow motion. They had painted me as the unstable one. And everyone was buying it. I hung up without another word. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, numb, hollowed out. Everything I knew, my family, my marriage, my reality, had crumbled. And the man who violated me was still walking free. Still smiling. I wanted to disappear, but deep down, beneath the despair, something colder began to form. If no one was going to save me, I was going to burn the whole thing to the ground myself. The next morning, I woke up different. The fear was still there, but it was buried beneath something sharper. Rage. A cold, quiet fury that gave me clarity I hadn't felt in weeks. They wanted me to vanish into silence. To doubt myself. To fall apart so they could rewrite the story. But I wasn't going to let them. If the police wouldn't move fast enough, I would. If my family wanted to bury me, I'd make damn sure they couldn't. The first thing I did was call a lawyer. A real one. Not some free consultation, but someone experienced in harassment and privacy violations. Sophie helped me set it up. She also suggested I post the hallway footage somewhere safe, somewhere no one could delete it or manipulate it. So I uploaded it to a cloud, encrypted and locked with multiple backups. I was done playing defense. The lawyer immediately took me seriously. She confirmed that what Matt did wasn't just creepy, it was criminal. Invasion of privacy. Sexual harassment. And if I could find even one shred of physical evidence, the phone, the files, the messages, it could push the case into real legal action. I knew Matt was careful. But careful didn't mean invincible. I dug deeper. Sophie and I scoured every social media account linked to Matt. We searched through any public storage he might have overlooked. And then, by some twisted stroke of luck, I found it. It wasn't on his personal account. It was on a hidden profile. A locked, anonymous-looking username that had a small collection of voyeur content. Most of it was anonymous, grainy, but one clip, blurry, but still recognizable, was me. Me. In my shower. I felt the world tilt under my feet. My hands went ice cold. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't even cry. Sophie sat beside me, stunned silent, her face pale. There it was. The proof. I took screenshots. Saved everything. Sent it to my lawyer immediately. I knew then that this wasn't just some twisted private game for Matt, he was sharing it. Publicly. I felt sick. Violated on a level I didn't even know existed. And yet, this was the break I needed. The next steps moved fast. My lawyer filed an emergency protective order. The police finally had grounds to seize devices from the house. Sophie stood by me every second. I handed over everything, the screenshots, the videos, the texts. All of it. Lucas tried calling me 3 times that day. I didn't answer. And then, something I didn't expect, Claire called too. I hesitated, then picked up, hands shaking. She was sobbing. "Why are you doing this to us?" she gasped. "Matt says you're framing him. He could lose everything. You're destroying our lives." I stayed silent. "Please," she begged, just stop this. Let's talk. We're family." The venom in her voice, the way she made me the villain, broke something final inside me. "I'm not the one who destroyed this family," I whispered. "Matt did. And you helped him." I hung up. Later that night, the police raided the house. They found the hidden phone. And worse, several devices. Matt was arrested. I got the call from the officer himself. He said, carefully, that there was enough material for formal charges. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just felt empty. But somewhere deep inside, I also felt the faintest flicker of something I thought I'd lost forever: power. Control. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't a liar. And I wasn't done yet. The hours after Matt's arrest felt surreal. For the first time in what felt like forever, I could breathe. I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't paranoid. The man who had violated me, mentally, emotionally, physically, was finally in handcuffs. But the victory wasn't clean. It wasn't anything like the relief I thought it would be. Because the fallout was immediate. And brutal. Claire showed up at Sophie's house the next morning, banging on the door like a madwoman. Sophie tried to block her, but I stepped outside. I needed to face her. I needed to look into the eyes of the person who let me drown while she stood by. Her face was red, tear-streaked, twisted with rage. "You did this," she screamed. "You've ruined everything. Our family. My marriage." I kept my voice calm, low. "Matt ruined everything. I just stopped him." She shook her head violently, her hands clutching her hair. "You set him up. You wanted this. You wanted to destroy us." Her words weren't just denial, they were venom. I realized then that no matter what the evidence showed, no matter what the police found, Claire would never believe me, or more likely, she would never allow herself to believe it. Because if she did, she'd have to face the fact that she shared her life, her bed, her trust with a predator. And it was easier to hate me than to face that truth. "I never wanted to destroy you," I said softly. "I just wanted to be safe. I wanted the truth." Her eyes narrowed. "He says you wanted him. That you came on to him. That you're sick." I actually laughed. A bitter, broken laugh. "Of course he says that." I turned away. I was done. I walked back inside, leaving her standing there, sobbing, shaking, clinging to a version of reality that made her feel less humiliated. I never saw her again. The legal process dragged on for months. Matt was formally charged with multiple counts of invasion of privacy and harassment. There was more, so much more, that came out. He had filmed other women. Strangers. Neighbors. He was worse than I ever imagined. Lucas filed for divorce 3 weeks after the arrest. He sent a pathetic text saying he couldn't deal with the mess and that too much damage had been done. Not one word of apology, not 1 ounce of regret. Just a man who wanted to escape the wreckage without looking back. I let him go without a fight. I started therapy. Not because I was crazy, but because I needed to stitch myself back together after everything they had done to me. The betrayal. The manipulation. The humiliation. It had left scars deeper than anything physical. But slowly, so slowly, I began to heal. The police thanked me for coming forward. They said Matt's arrest might have saved others. The thought gave me a kind of cold comfort. A purpose in the wreckage. The rest of my family stayed silent. My mother never called again. My name became a hushed whisper at gatherings I would never be invited to. I was branded as the troublemaker, the destroyer, the liar, because that was easier for them to accept than the ugly, undeniable truth. But I don't regret it. I don't regret standing up, even when no one stood with me. Because I was right. And no matter how much they tried to bury me, no matter how much they twisted the story, the truth was out. And now, months later, as I rebuild my life piece by piece, I still carry the weight of what happened, but I also carry something else, the knowledge that I survived. And that they'll never be able to silence me again. Sometimes, though, when I close my eyes at night, I still wonder, how many people like me are still living in silence because no one will believe them? And that thought haunts me more than anything else.
Follow me for more stories.